The first time it happened, it was a betrayal of the smallest, most intimate kind. A mole, a dark freckle on the inside of my left wrist that I had known my entire life. The one I would trace with a fingertip when lost in thought, had moved. It was no longer nestled beside the thin blue line of a vein, but had migrated a full centimeter toward my thumb, a tiny, silent defection. I stared, my breath held, trying to force memory to align with reality. It couldn't have moved. Moles don't move. I was tired, overworked, spending too many hours hunched over the fragile, illuminated pages of the medieval manuscript I was restoring. The vellum dust, fine as pollen, made me sneeze and my eyes water. It was eye strain, I concluded. A trick of the light in my dim, book-lined apartment. I dismissed it with a shaky laugh and went to make coffee. The city outside my window hummed with a life that felt a universe away. My world was one of quiet preservation, of arresting decay. As a conservator for a private collection, my days were spent in a state of meticulous, focused reverence for the past. My current project, a 15th century copy of Cicero's Somnium Scipionis, was particularly demanding. Its subject, the soul's journey, its detachment from the corporeal form, had begun to seep into my own thoughts, lending my solitude a philosophical, almost melancholic weight. It was this work, I told myself, that was making me see things. A week later, the constellation of 3 moles on my right shoulder blade, a formation I privately nicknamed Orion's belt as a child, was distorted. The middle star had drifted, breaking the perfect, familiar line. I discovered this while stretching after a long day, catching a glimpse in the hallway mirror. The reflection was fleeting, but the sense of wrongness was immediate and cold. This time, I couldn't dismiss it so easily. I twisted, craning my neck, using my phone's camera to get a better look. The image on the screen was undeniable. The pattern was broken. My skin, the very canvas of my identity, was editing itself without my permission. A frantic inventory began. I stood shirtless in the stark, buzzing light of my bathroom, scanning every inch of my body. The smattering of dark marks across my chest and abdomen, a geography I knew better than any map, seemed stable. But the uncertainty was a seed now planted. Had that one, near my collarbone, always been so close to the other? Was the tiny speck on my hip new? My memory, once a reliable archive, had become a chamber of doubts. I felt a phantom itch crawl across my back, a sensation like 1,000 tiny legs marching just beneath the surface. I scratched until the skin was raw, but the feeling persisted, internal and unreachable. That night, sleep offered no escape. I dreamt of ink bleeding across ancient parchment, the carefully penned Latin letters dissolving into meaningless blotches. I saw constellations in a night sky rearranging themselves into unfamiliar patterns, stars skittering like terrified insects. I woke up with my heart pounding against my ribs, the sheets twisted around my legs. A thin sheen of sweat cooled on my skin. The crawling sensation was back, a faint, electric thrumming concentrated on my back, between my shoulder blades. The next morning, I called Chloe. Her voice, warm and familiar, was a lifeline. "Alex, you sound weird. Is everything okay?" "Yeah, fine, just working too hard, I guess." I tried to keep my tone light. "Do you want to get dinner tonight?" "I can't. I have that gallery opening. I told you about it, remember?" I didn't. The days had been blurring. My focus narrowing to the manuscript and the silent, creeping changes on my own skin. "Oh, right." A pause stretched between us. "Are you sure you're okay?" she asked, her voice softening with concern. "You've been distant. It's like you're a ghost in your own life lately." The word ghost snapped in my mind. I'm just tired, Chloe, really. We ended the call with promises to see each other soon. But the conversation left me feeling even more isolated. How could I explain this? That I thought my own body was slowly becoming a foreign landscape. She would think I was losing my mind. I was beginning to think so myself. To preserve what I felt was my sanity, I began to document. I bought a high-resolution digital camera and a tripod. Each night, before bed, I would go through a bizarre ritual, photographing my entire torso, my arms, my legs. I printed the images, dating them, creating a timeline on my own skin. I even bought a set of fine-tipped archival pens and tracing paper, carefully outlining the moles on the paper, overlaying them on my skin each morning to check for microscopic shifts. I was a conservator of myself, attempting to arrest the decay of my own reality. The work was a comfort. It was methodical, empirical. It was proof. And the proof was terrifying. The movements were no longer subtle. They were happening overnight. A mole on my forearm would appear a few millimeters to the left. A cluster on my stomach would tighten, drawing closer together. The crawling sensation intensified, no longer a phantom itch but a definite, physical feeling, like a subcutaneous current. The sounds in my apartment began to feel complicit. The old building's groans and sighs seemed to sync with the thrumming under my skin. The whisper of the ventilation sounded like a dry, scratching pen. My own reflection became untrustworthy. Sometimes, when I catch it unexpectedly in a darkened window, the face looking back seemed like a stranger's. The features momentarily unfamiliar until my mind corrected the image. I made an appointment with my doctor. Dr. Harris was a kind, practical man in his late 50s. I sat on the crinkling paper of the examination table, my shirt off, feeling exposed and foolish. "So, you think your moles are moving?" he asked, his pen poised over my chart. "I know it sounds crazy," I said, my voice tight. "But I have proof." I showed him the photographs. He looked at them patiently, then examined my skin, peering through a magnifying lens. "Alex, the body changes," he said gently. "Skin elasticity, minor shifts in tissue, it's normal. What you're describing, this hyper-awareness, the itching, it can be a symptom of severe stress, or a condition called dermatographia, where the skin is overly sensitive to pressure. When you scratch, it can create welts and redness that you might perceive as movement." He saw the desperation in my eyes. The mind is a powerful thing. You're under a lot of pressure with your work, the isolation. He prescribed a mild sedative and recommended I see a therapist. I left the clinic with the prescription unfilled, clutching my portfolio of photos. He thought I was delusional, but his rationalizations felt thin, like paper shields against a coming flood. He hadn't felt the crawling. He hadn't seen the stars of his own body fall out of alignment. The relationship with Chloe dissolved. I canceled plans, didn't answer her calls. When she finally came to my apartment, I couldn't let her in. "What is wrong with you, Alex?" she yelled through the door, her voice cracking. "Talk to me." "I can't," I whispered, my back pressed against the wood, my hands clenched into fists. I could feel them, the moles, 100 tiny points of awareness on my skin, all stirring. "It's like you're not even the same person I met," she said, her voice dropping to a wounded hush. "You're just empty." I heard her footsteps recede down the hallway, and the silence that followed was heavier than any sound. She was right. I was being hollowed out, my sense of self eroded by this quiet, relentless invasion. The anomaly was no longer minor, it was a constant, humming presence. The focus of the movement seemed to be on my back, an area I couldn't properly see. The crawling was most intense there, a nexus of activity. I tried to contort myself in front of the mirror, to use my phone to capture it. But the angles were awkward, the images blurry. My nights were now sleepless ordeals. I would lie in bed, rigid, feeling the sickening migration under my skin. Like continents drifting across a world of flesh. The sounds in the apartment grew more distinct. I could hear a faint, dry scraping coming from within the walls, a sound that mirrored the feeling on my skin. I would search for the source, pressing my ear to the plaster, but it was everywhere and nowhere. One evening, hunched over the sunbeam chipiones, my lamp casting a pool of warm light on the vellum. A passage seemed to leap out at me. "Do you see that city?" he said, pointing to Carthage. "Your soul is not you, but the body is the house of the soul. It is the inner man that is you, not the form which can be pointed at with a finger." My breath hit the inner man, not the form. My hands trembled as I looked down at them. They seemed alien, the fingers too long, the knuckles too delicate. For a dizzying second, I felt a profound sense of dislocation, as if I were a passenger in a vessel I did not recognize. The feeling passed, but the unease lingered, thick and suffocating. The turning point came on a Tuesday. I woke up after a night of feverish, dreamless sleep. The crawling on my back had reached a frantic crescendo during the night before abruptly ceasing. The sudden silence was more alarming than the activity. I felt calm. The skin on my back was still, but it felt tight, stretched. I stumbled into the bathroom, my heart a slow, heavy drum. My eyes were bloodshot, the face in the mirror gaunt. I turned, lifting my phone, my hands surprisingly steady. I angled the camera over my shoulder and took a picture. I lowered the phone and looked at the screen. The smattering of moles, the random chaos of pigment that had decorated my back for my entire life, was gone. In its place, stretching between my shoulder blades in neat, deliberate marks, was a word. The moles, dozens of them, had been marshaled, arranged like soldiers, forming 5 distinct letters: ELARA. The phone slipped from my numb fingers and clattered onto the tile floor. I stared at my own back in the reflection of the phone's dark screen. At the impossible word written in my own flesh, ELARA. The name meant nothing to me. I'd never known ELARA. It was a beautiful name, ethereal and strange, and it was branded on me. The boundary between reality and horror didn't blur, it shattered. I was no longer an archivist cataloging an anomaly. I was the artifact. The horror was not happening to me, it was me. My logical mind, what was left of it, scrambled for purchase. Was it a message, warning, a name from a past life, bubbling up through my skin? I spent the next 2 days in a fugue state, tearing my apartment apart. I searched old yearbooks, photo albums, letters, looking for a forgotten classmate, a childhood friend, anyone named ELARA. Nothing. I scoured the internet, genealogy sites, public records. There were thousands of ELARAs, all of them strangers. The manuscript lay open on my desk, a silent observer. The inner man that is you, not the phone. The phrase echoed in my skull. The scraping sound in the walls had stopped. The apartment was utterly silent, save for my own ragged breathing. I felt a new sensation, not a crawling, but a deep, resonant ache in my bones. A sorrow that felt ancient and bottomless. It wasn't my sorrow. I started to notice other things. Details I had previously ignored or rationalized away. the faint scent of jasmine that sometimes clung to the curtains in the bedroom. I'd assumed it was from the previous tenant. The collection of classical music records Debussy, Satie, that I never listened to but felt a strange, protective ownership over. The way my own handwriting sometimes veered into a more elegant, looping script before I corrected it. My aversion to having my picture taken, which I always passed off as shyness. The memories came in flashes, disjointed and sharp as broken glass. A glimpse of hands, pale and slender with painted nails, resting on piano keys, not my hands. The sound of a woman's laughter, light and airy, in a sun-drenched park, not my laugh. The jarring sensation of looking down and seeing a floral dress, the fabric soft against her legs. These weren't memories, they were ghosts. The climax arrived not with a scream, but with a terrible, dawning stillness. I stood before the full-length mirror on my wardrobe door, a mirror I typically avoided. I forced myself to look, to truly see, past the filter of my own perception. For 34 years, I had seen Alex in the mirror. A man of average height, with dark hair, brown eyes, a familiar face. But now, armed with the impossible knowledge branded on my back, I looked closer. I focused on the details I had always subconsciously edited. The jawline, less square than I remembered, with a softer curve. The neck, long and slender. The width of the shoulders, not broad, but delicate. The shape of the hips beneath my jeans, a subtle flare I had always ignored. The face was the same face I saw every day, but the interpretation was different. The high cheekbones, the full lips, the large, dark eyes. My mind had projected Alex onto this form. A desperate act of self-preservation, a psychological overlay so complete it had rewritten my perception of reality. The form which can be pointed at with a finger. The truth hit me with the force of a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. I was the ghost, I was the anomaly, Alex was the delusion. This body, this skin, this life, it wasn't mine, it was hers, it was ELARA's. I staggered back, clutching my head, the room spinning. The manuscript, the apartment, the clothes in the closet. Chloe's words, "You're not the same person, you're just empty." Deeper airs of confusion over my symptoms. It all clicked into place, the hidden details aligning to form a monstrous, terrifying new picture. I was a squatter, a parasite of consciousness. What happened? An accident. I searched the deep recesses of my fractured memory, pushing past the barricades my mind had erected. A flash of headlights, the screech of tires, the shattering of glass, a shared, catastrophic moment. Two minds, two souls, in one car. One body survived, mine did not. In a primal, terrified scramble for existence. My consciousness, my sense of self, Alex, had latched onto the only available vessel. It had imprinted itself over her, suppressing her, burying her. Building a life for itself from the wreckage. And the moles, they weren't a message, they were rebellion. Her body's last, desperate attempt to remember itself. A cellular insurrection, spelling out her name, screaming her identity into the flesh that I had stolen, ELARA. It wasn't a warning, it was a reclamation. I sank to the floor, the polished wood cool against my cheek. I was not Alex, I was a fever, a sickness that ELARA's body was trying to fight off. The crawling, the itching, it was her immune system, her very cells, rejecting the foreign presence that was me. The sorrow I felt wasn't mine, it was hers, leaking through the cracks in my stolen identity. How long had I been here? How long had I been wearing her life like a suit? The realization didn't bring clarity, only a deeper, more profound horror. The question was no longer what was happening to my body. The question was, what was I going to do to hers? I lay there for hours as the light outside faded from gray to black. A strange calm settled over me. The fight was over. I had lost. Or, more accurately, I had been found out. I slowly, stiffly, got to my feet. A new sensation was beginning on my back. Not a crawling this time, but a slow, deliberate pulling, a profound and deep restructuring. It didn't hurt, it was simply happening. My hand went to my phone, still lying on the bathroom floor. The screen was cracked, but it turned on. With a sense of finality, of bearing witness to my own erasure, I turned and lifted the phone one last time. I angled it over my shoulder, my finger hovering over the button. The word ELARA was no longer there. The moles were a chaotic scramble again, a meaningless scatterplot. For a moment, a wild, desperate hope surged through me. It was over. The fever had broken. But then, I saw it. 2 moles, near the top of my right shoulder blade, were drawing together. Another, lower down, was drifting slowly, deliberately upward to join them. A new pattern was forming, a new word. I took the picture. My hand trembled as I brought the phone around to face me. The image was clear. The process had begun again. The word was not yet complete, but I could see the first letter. Stark and undeniable against the pale skin I had mistaken for my own. It was a single, sharp, angular shape behind my name. The body was no longer trying to remember its own name. It was now identifying the invader. It was naming me. The skin, the flesh, the very cells of this body I inhabited, had found their new enemy. And they were beginning to write his name.